Let's move further. Now the next thing that you see over here is your application gateway. Now, like we mentioned in yesterday's session, whenever it comes to application gateway, as far as application gateway is concerned, application gateway is more to do with your HTTP and HTTPS protocols. It is specialized for these protocols. Whereas if you look at Azure Load Balancer, it is for a base set of protocols, it is TCP and UDP. So if you look at your application gateway, your front-end IP over here, what this will allow you to do is, this will allow you to accept your FQDNs, your DNS resources that you have, front-end IP, public IP that you have. Behind the scene, it will map to your HTTP, HTTPS listener. So you have to configure your listener over here. Certain things will remain same, but there are other things which will change over here. Along with your HTTP, HTTPS listener, you can configure your verbs over here. You can specify your configuration details over here. Apart from this, you can specify your HTTP, HTTPS settings using the load balancer rule. Now this load balancer rule will remain same. Okay. One of the core advantages of application gateway that we have is it can connect to different type of resources. Connect to virtual machine scale set, your which is a representation of infrastructure as a service components. Along with that, it can also help you communicate with Azure App Services, which is PaaS service. If you see your Azure Load Balancer as a service, it cannot help you connect with your Azure App Service. Secondly, this can also help you communicate with your on-premises or external app servers. This is another beautiful aspect of application gateway. Azure Application Gateway can also connect with your on-premises environment using a gateway, or you can also use your site-to-site connectivity. That is the beautiful part about application gateway as compared to other load balancers that we have. So if you look at something like front-end front door service, though it is working on HTTP, HTTPS, it cannot help you connect to your on-premises environment. It will only help you communicate, or it will only help you work with your Azure-based resources or web-based resources running on cloud platforms. That's the core advantage of using application gateway. So it helps you communicate with infrastructure components on Azure, outside Azure, and also using PaaS services. Now all these things you can add within the backend pool. So things like backend pool, your rules that you are creating, right? These are all part of your, these are similar to your earlier load balancer. So if you look at your application gateway, as part of application gateway, how it works is whenever you are receiving an incoming request, this will be an HTTPS request. So you have your listener, you'll have your SSL certificate configured over here. Once the encryption is being done, right, you can specify your HTTP settings over here, and on this routing, you can specify a routing rule which will convert all these HTTP requests, HTTPS requests into HTTP. So all communications that could happen behind the scene would be using a HTTP rather than HTTPS. So what you can do is you can do something called as offloading of sessions or offloading of HTTPS for faster communications within your backend environment, right? So these things you can configure as part of your application gateway. Along with this, the third aspect that you'll see over here as an advantage of application gateway, here you can do something called as path-based routing. So when I have number of resources within the pool, I know that which of these resources will need high-end processing, or on which machines I have high-end processing, on which machine I have average processing. So what I can do is I can use a path-based routing. So depending upon what is the URL path given by the user, I can redirect that to a specific set of machines, right? Now this configuration based routing or path based routing can be done because all these requests which are coming are HTTP URLs, right? So I can check for those URL path and redirect it to a specific member. I'm not sure if the third, yeah, this one. So I can also have something called as multiple site routing, which means if I want to create a multi-domain kind of application or multi-tenant applications, even those things I can implement by using application gateway. So not just the path, but also if the DNS is being changed or the DNS request which is coming in, I can map it to a different set of resources. So you all can imagine this as for each user, I have a different set of VMs or I have different set of uh, combination of IS and PaaS services where I have SQL database being configured, I have web application being configured targeted towards that particular user, right? So this is what I can do using application gateway routing.
So both those will have the same IP address, same.
Both these users,
Contoso and Fabrica both have same IP address, public IP.
this is not a pub.
No,
this
no,
is a
no.
DNS. Yes, they will have a different DNS mapping. When they have this DNS mapping, depending upon what is the DNS which is coming in, FQDN which is coming in, it will route it to a specific pool behind the scene.
But it has to go through application gateway, right?
Yes, the URL being shared or the DNS will be shared or mapped to your application gateway.
Okay. So the application gateway has two IP addresses or one?
It has two. It has a single IP address, but it has mapping with two DNS.
Okay.
So once the DNS is being mapped, once the request comes in the application gateway, it will map to respective members behind the scene.
Okay.
If you look at your gateway routing over here, it can help you do redirections like I showed you earlier, right? Rewrite your HTTP headers. So any additional information you want to add over here, you can do that. We may also configure custom error pages here. And all these features that you see are part of your application, HTTP application that we are deploying. If you look at the configuration over here, this is what I was talking about, SSL offloading. So I can do SSL offloading from HTTPS to HTTP. So you can define your front-end IP like we did it in front-end IP configuration. Behind that, we have a listener. So your front-end IP will be client-facing, mapping to the listener behind the scene, where you have your certificates being configured. So behind the rule that you're creating, you'll have your HTTP settings. I can have respective stickiness or probes or whatever timeout you want to mention. And for working, taking these requests and processing it, you have your backend pool over here. And within the backend pool, you'll have your VMs, your virtual machine scale set. You can have your app services over here. So all these things you can create within your backend pool. Within Azure portal, let's go and create application gateway. Whatever name you want to give to this. Region Southeast Asia. Now, if you look at the tiers over here, you have standard V2, you have your WAF-based application gateway as well. So when you associate WAF over here, what we are doing is we are associating a web application firewall. Okay, So any of your resources, which is filtering of network traffic, checking of OS 10 rules, top 10 rules like XSS, CSRF, then other issues that you have, generic web application issues that you have, all those filtering can be done using your WAF gateway itself, right? So what we'll do is, while creating the application gateway, let me choose WAF v2, which will automatically take care of the OS rules while we are creating this application gateway. So we don't have to create two resources here. Just one resource should be sufficient. Maximum instance count, minimum instance count, maximum instance count, how many you want. Okay, so how many minimum maximum instances you want. What is the firewall status that you want? So let me take firewall status as enable. For all requests, it should filter through it. As far as firewall mode is concerned, what do you want? You want to detect it and generate a report for it, or you want to stop these attacks or stop these OS rules that we have mentioned, stop all the unwanted requests that we are handling over here. In terms of availability zone, we can mention these resources here: zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. So each machine that we are creating, if you see this, each of these are virtual machines which Microsoft is creating behind the scene and managing it for us. I don't have a virtual network right now. I deleted everything yesterday. Let me create a new virtual network with the default values. So here what we are configuring is your resources in terms of number of instances you want. It is application gateway with web application firewall. Let's move further. In terms of front-end resources, like we did in basic load balancer, here what we can do is we can specify, if you remember, we had internal and public internal and public resources. Here also you have public and private options available. So depending upon whether you are hosting a web application, or now in case of Azure Load Balancer, there I mentioned about database. In this scenario, there is no database. Why? Because database will not run on port number 80 or port number 8080. So when are we going to use this one? When are we going to use private over here? Anyone? Any idea?
It's internal gateway, like test environments.
Not bad. Or you
Like
may have something called as service APIs. Certain APIs that you have, which I don't want to publish publicly. I want to use it for internal purposes. There are application services or application components that I want to use internally. And between those, for those communications, I want to use private front-end IP configuration. Okay, let me go ahead. Specify name over here. CF, whatever name you want to give. Let's go to the backend section. Now here you see, once the front-end configuration is done, let's go to the backend configuration. Let's add a backend pool over here. Okay. So I can add a backend pool without targets. Target in sense you have to mention your machine's FQDA. Like we mentioned IP addresses over there. Here you need to mention IP addresses. You can mention virtual machines, scale sets, app services. So all these things we can add over here. As of now, I don't have any of these resources. So I'll create a backend pool which is empty without targets. We can add this targets later as well, not an issue. Now this is a very important section, like how we had backend rule, how we had rule configuration, right? Same way you can add members over here. So the front-end IP configuration is done already. Let's go to routing rules over here. You can specify whatever number of rules. This is actually a collection. So you can add as many number of rules as you want. Let's mention the rules over here. Right? What is the protocol that you want to use for communicating with external users? If we have SSL available, SSL certificate available with us, they can map it with HTTPS over here. Right? So what is the type of listener you want? You want a basic listener with path-based routing, or you want to use a multi-site or different set of domains? That's our choice. If you want a error page URL, what will be the pages that you have deployed within your app service or within your virtual machines? Mention the path over here for those custom pages. Right? So this is your front-end listener configuration. In terms of back-end targets, you can associate your pool over here. I don't have any HTTP settings for now. Let me add a new one. Right? So do you want cookie-based affinity? Do you want to do connection draining over here? So depending upon what is the current application that you want to connect to, in the backend pool, we can specify those HTTP settings over here. What is the request timeout that you would want? So those things we can add over here as part of your backend targets. Okay. If you want to do a redirection to an external site, remember we are mentioning about on-premises environment and connectivity with that. So you can associate that with your external site over here using redirection. Right? So any kind of path-based rule that you want to create. What is the path that you would want? What is the target that you want to communicate with? So these kind of changes, these kind of path resources you can mention over here. Let's go ahead, click on add. So we have added a listener over here for the front end configuration. We have added a backend target over here. So maximum changes that you'll see, or whatever values that we have discussed as part of the architecture, maximum of them are getting configured using the routing rules. So depending upon your backend pool, backend targets, you can mention these resources here. Like I said, these routing rules are collections. So you can add a second value as well. So how many rules you want to add over here? So once you're done with the configuration, we have done a respective mapping with backend pool. You can go ahead and click on create.
So Harsh, once it's up and running, it can be edited again, right?
Yes, it can be edited
Right.
again. So what we have done right now is we have got a web application gateway that with application gateway configured. But right now, this backend pool that we have mentioned, this is empty.